Thank you for joining this showcase session. Today, we're going to be covering your SaaS and helping you close the gaps in your Microsoft 365 defense. My name is Corinne Bissett. I'm a technologist here at Veeam Software, as well as a Microsoft MVP. Let's take a look at our agenda for today. First, we're going to be setting the landscape for what risk and what is at risk in your Microsoft 365 and Azure environments. Then we're going to be going into where these struggles come up, settle in with how you might be able to help protect yourself and fill in these gaps. And last, we're going to be taking a super secret sneak peek at the new UI, which is going to include Entra ID, Azure, and Microsoft 365 backup within the same backup plane for a software as a service backup. Let's dive right in here to some statistics. So looking at your data and seeing if it's actually at risk in these different platforms has become a hot topic in a lot of today's conversations. First of all, we get asked, hey, is this really at risk? What are the risk factors? Doesn't Microsoft cover all of these defensive gaps in your ecosystem? Well, yes and no. So there are places like the back-end infrastructure, such as the networking, the security between those interconnected points on the Microsoft 365 platform, and the software as a service, infrastructure as a service, and platform as a service ecosystems. But anything that really comes in through that front door, so a compromised password, user, whatever it might be, even an application, can put your risk or your data at risk. We have a couple statistics here. First of all is the amount of breaches that happen via just passwords. One of my favorite websites out there is haveibeenpwned.com. This website takes FBI polls and dark web polls for all user accounts and passwords that have been compromised out there, comes back around and provides you a list of what companies have been breached. If you have maybe an automotive account that you've signed up for and that password or any information with that account has been compromised, they let you know. And I swear every time I come into this website, I am always and completely shocked by the amount of data breaches that happen just on a daily basis. There are over 6 million attacks to Entra ID alone every single day. They really only have to get it right once in order to make it into your infrastructure. I'm really reminded of this graphical meme that I seen where they have this giant African Amazon, and there's river flowing through this Amazon. And you see these gazelles running through this river. And you see bunches of gazelles make it to the other side, but it's also crocodile infested. And the crocodiles are just happy to get one here and there in order to make their meals. And the gazelles think they're going to fly on through. But the more times that you have to cross that river, the more likely you are to have some sort of attack into your network. And they're going to get someone because it is also their business. Now, what is at stake when you have any of these environments attacked? We think they're a lot more lightweight. It just has user authentication or access, but there's a lot deeper and a bigger impact to your business and every day than just, okay, an attack occurred, I got to recover a couple of users, reset a password, we're done. Unfortunately, this ends up being a much larger impact, meaning if you have one compromised user, that user can then impersonate other accounts in order to gain special information. And you might be thinking, okay, the big accounts in my organization are my C-levels and admins, which in some cases are true, but if you start looking at HR and finances, competitive intelligence where deals are trying to close, these are all valuable pieces of information that can really be sold to the highest bidder. On top of all of this, anytime someone comes into your environment, they're actually looking for more than to just steal and corrupt your data. What they do is look at all of the applications that you have in your infrastructure, looking for possible weak points, not just now, but possibly in the future. Maybe you have additional application groups that you haven't quite locked down because they're through legacy settings. We've been in cloud for many years now, which means we have some legacy to clean up as we go along. In addition to seeing what's already there, they'll start to put these little teeny back doors into your infrastructure, and you have hundreds or hundreds of thousands of applications. They're able to put 1 or even 5 in there in the background that you're not able to see amongst the sea of other applications, compromise an existing application, and be able to quickly recover. This becomes a much, much bigger problem. So this also starts to lead to something like data loss. And data loss really starts to impact business continuity. Whenever you have any kind of loss in reporting or your databases or websites, it's going to immediately depict to an outside entity that you're not processing business the way that you should, and sometimes this ends in a loss of reputation and things like that. It's really hard to predict a lot of time how much impact having a single server down would impact your entire business until it happens, which is why it's very important to run these kind of simulations and stress to upper leadership that this impacts the day-to-day. Yes, okay, you may not check your email every 5 minutes, but it's usually a larger scale that you're looking at. Now let's talk about some of the tools associated with these infrastructures. And this really has a core to the Entra ID sector. So when you look at Entra ID, it's used to access your Azure resources, your Microsoft 365 resources, your Dynamics, a lot of your sign-ons and machines. With this core being compromised, then you have to worry about backtracking to these other applications. So we need a cross-compatible application that understands how these ecosystems work together. Native tools are not generally enough in a lot of these cases, and we can take a look at this as a bigger picture in the shared responsibility model. Now, this is Microsoft's shared responsibility model, and then we tack on what additional protections that we're able to offer with a traditional backup. When you're looking at your on-premises environment, you are definitely responsible for all of the infrastructure, the security, and things like that. But as you move up the different layers in that chain, you start to let go of some of those controls. But it's very important to understand, even when you get to the software as a service side factor here, yes, you no longer have to take care of that underlying application, meaning no more updates and configurations on that back end, but you still need to protect the data that lives there and the access to that data that lives there. Then, with the protection, you're able to recover all the way across. So let's see what it looks like to build resiliency into these different components. And I'd like to kind of start talking about our Veeam Data Cloud, which we'll also be doing a live demo on here in just a moment. And I do want to pause just for one moment to ask if you have any questions, please pop those down into the chat. I'd love to review and try to get these answered as much as possible. Anything we don't get to, we'll definitely get back to you after this webinar. All right, so one of the most overlooked gaps in protection, especially in software as a service entities, is the Microsoft 365 protection and identity. Now, we talk a lot about Microsoft 365, and of course, like your OneDrive and your SharePoint and your Exchange and Teams information is important for day-to-day. But just as important is having your identity in a consistent factor, because that cuts off access to the entire rest of that ecosystem. Now, let's take a look at what Veeam Data Cloud offers as a whole. We started off this platform exploration with the launch of the Microsoft 365 platform. This year, we're expanding that onto an Azure, which is just around the corner. We should hear more news on that soon. we've had our Veeam Vault, which if you're not familiar with Veeam Vault, this is a fancy storage account. And I say fancy because it has a lot of extra protections on the back end that make sure the data is encrypted, make sure that it is service level immutability, making sure that it is consistent with the Veeam backup and replication backups. We also have our Entra ID product, which covers many of the Entra ID platform and ecosystem. We'll take a look at some of the key features that are there, including being able to do comparisons to old data. And last on this list is Salesforce. Now, Salesforce is a huge system. We have had the Salesforce product for quite a few years now, and we'll take a brief overlook at what the usability of that looks like within the portal as well. Now, this entire portfolio has been expanding, and we have some exciting announcements coming around the corner for what you'll be able to see there, including additional AI components so that you can go ahead and not just understand the portal, but be able to ask it questions as you would as an administrator. Now let's hop right in here to this portal. Now, for anyone that's been in the Veeam Data Cloud portal, you may notice that this is a little different than from what you're used to seeing. This portal now has a facelift. We can see everything from the same window here with the Microsoft 365, Entra ID, Salesforce, Vault, and now Azure AD. We also have in development a new dashboard. Now, I will mind that some of these are not fully hashed out, so we'll take a look at what the potential and what is coming in the future. So as you can see, we're going to have dashboards. Within these dashboards, there are going to be configurable zones, so you can say what workload that you're mostly interested in seeing, and a list of the tenants that you would like to display here. So if you're managing multiple tenants, multiple platforms, you can easily scope this down to see exactly what you need to see from your environment. These kind of windows are what I like to refer to as coffee windows, meaning as you're trying to drink your coffee and you're coming in the morning, you can make sure nothing's on fire and you can easily get through your day. Let's start off with the first application here in the list, which is going to be the Microsoft 365 backup. A lot of these windows will have additional statistics that you can see high level as you click on through each of the individual scopes. So if you have multiple tenants, you'll be able to click into each tenant and see, hey, how much storage am I using? Do I have any unprotected users? What is my recent activity and licensing? And we can see that here. If there are any notifications that you have configured to say, hey, is something going wrong? You can immediately see this here. You can see there's a restore done for a SharePoint site. I can easily click on that and get some more data, like what was restored, was it successful, and who initiated those kinds of restores. There are tons of additional reports here. If you're familiar with our Veeam 1 product, we're slowly working in a lot of those reports that you like seeing every single day. And you can schedule and generate these reports automatically sent to any additional email for you. Our search allows you to search through all of the objects within this area. So we can switch between Outlook, OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams. Any of these areas are going to give you specific search results for those types of data. So as we can see within the SharePoint here, we can select individual items that we would associate with the SharePoint. So our SharePoint sites, and then the keywords that might come along with it. If you really need to get advanced, so something that might be for an audit type reason, you can come in here, do certain dates, fields. And again, these are going to change to be towards the object type of that environment. Let's take a look at what a policy looks like. Now with the backup of Microsoft 365, there are going to be two main policy types. You're going to have your Flex, which is going to allow you to do more of a traditional type of backup, which you're going to get really granular recovery with, and the Express. Express is going to use the Microsoft backup service. And the backup storage from the Microsoft backup storage is going to allow you to do bulk recovery. And this bulk recovery will, say, do terabytes within an hour instead of some of the granular recovery features that you get from just the Flex. So we can see the entire organization is selected here. We can edit and see select groups, SharePoint sites, or if you want to do parts of your organization. That is all possible. Now, restore is a lot of fun because it is super easy. You simply need to select which application you're working with, and it becomes much like a file explorer where you can path down through the different users' mailboxes and individual items within those mailboxes. So we can simply click on Aaron here and we'll be able to see all of the items that are underneath of Aaron, including his inbox, any types of calendars, contacts. And of course, we monitor everything within this portal so that you can see who is either managing, deleting, or moving those kind of items. Let's check out the Entra ID. We'll put a pause on the Azure side because that's really the main event here, one of our newest brought up, and we'll click on the Entra ID. We're going to be able to see the objects backed up from the Entra ID environment. The Entra ID environment is going to include many different object types, which are going to be like your roles, applications, groups, users, conditional access policies, and your administrative units. This also does a log backup of your Entra ID environment, which is a maximum of 30 days by default from Microsoft, and then they just go to really nowhere. Meaning you need to have a backup of these if you need to do an audit back more than 30 days. So let's take a look at some of the objects backed up within this portal. And just to highlight how granular the access to this is, we're going to select one of the users here and do a compare and restore. Now, let me explain a little about what this does on the background, which is more than just restoring. So a compare and restore we'll take the enterprise application that we leverage for the console. It reaches out to the Microsoft 365 environment in production. It takes a complete capture of what that user looks like right now. Then it'll take all of that data from that user and bring back the metadata and compare it to what we have inside of the backup. So you can path through multiple backup chains and say, hey, I want to know what it looked like 2 months ago to what it looked like in production today. And we'll do a metadata comparison of what has changed and make it easily visible within here. You can select to only restore those changed items. If the user's already deleted, you can just proceed and do a full restore of the user, and it will send it back to the Entra ID environment. The granularity of the types of metadata are down to things like address and business groups types or any type of job titles in that environment. Then you can even compare and see everything that is within there. So let's take a look at the Entra ID logs. So within the logs we have here, we have both the audit logs and the sign-in logs. These can be exported and uploaded to any type of system that you have available that can parse them, or if you're looking for something very specific and you happen to know the date and time that occurred, you can easily download these, find the information you need, and be able to take whatever kind of action that you need to off of that information. Next, let's take a quick peek at Salesforce. Now, within Salesforce, this application environment allows you to have a single place to manage more of your software as a service systems. We get a high-level overview of what backups take place. We make sure we back up that metadata. And if you have different types of objects and modifications, you can see those records within here very easily. If you need to browse those backups, we have the same type of advanced restore system, But if you notice, these are more like objects that you would expect to see from a Salesforce environment. Next, let's go ahead and double click into Vault. Vault allows you to add in additional tenants. If you want to onboard them into the environment, you may have multiple tenants depending on how you have your organization configured. Then you simply click into any of these tenants and you can configure who has access to the storage, how is the access going to be configured, and deploy additional storage accounts. Now, within the storage vault, you can see individually who is consuming what kind of storage, a timeline of that types of storage and influx, and assign different types to those workloads. Last, let's go ahead and take a look at the new product, which is going to be our Azure Backup. Now, this is a new product to the Veeam Data Cloud. We've actually been doing this for quite some time inside of the marketplace, as well as through the Veeam Backup and Replication Explorer as a plugin. So as we can see how many jobs are running, if we have any states, we're also going to be able to not just do the virtual machines, but all of the other things that you expect to be able to do from the main product. Let's look at two different policy types here. I'm going to start off and edit this new age policy type so we can see a simple deployment of these settings. First of all, you only need to name it. Next, you'll determine what kind of source is this policy pulling from. You can either select all of the regions, or if you know you're only scoping down to a single region, you can select that there. Then, based off of resource groups and your tags, you can select what kind of resources are still available, add them down here to the list, and that's pretty much all you need to do to get started with a high-level backup, other than selecting what type of policy you want to back up by. We have our bronze policy here, which is going to do 7 days of the snapshots and 30 days of weekly backups, as well as 12 months kept on file for monthlies. Our silver tier is going to step that up down to an 8-hour daily. And our gold tier, which might be for very high critical, high sensitivity to data loss types of machines, you can see here. And then the summary is just confirming all of the information and saving that. Now, there is an advanced configuration that we can do here that's going to give you a little bit more control, as well as enable things like guest processing. It's the theme to start off with. You need to define what kind of scope you want to back up from. In this case, I backed up a network group, so resource group that included all of my network settings. I put this into a higher tier because this is a much more sensitive type of data that if something changes, it could mean something's gone wrong in my environment. And I still have application aware snapshots in case there are some other resources within this group. Next, you have some options around creating additional tags or switching to different regions associated with those backend snapshots. Keep in mind that with these backend snapshots, you may have additional storage costs on the underlying region. And I've set up some nice notifications so I can make sure this critical job has processed successfully. Now, before we wrap up here, I want to take a look at one more thing within the console, and it's actually one of the things I'm most excited about, which is going to be this new feature, well, newer feature, which is our AI. You can ask the AI different questions, and within this, it'll be specific to each of the entities that you work with. So I can say how to add a tenant. So if I'm just getting into the portal and I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing, I can click the little assistant at the top, say, hey, can you give me some instructions on how to create a job and how to do something, how to make sure I'm doing it securely, how do I add additional users? You'll be able to do it from this window, and you'll get clear, decisive steps for this. So let's head back over to the PowerPoint. Now, we have a couple of questions here. The first of course, is when are we going to see the new UI out there in the ecosystem? We do have it on the docket by end of year is going to be my answer, but you should see something here very soon, and it automatically starting to show up. All right, and we do have another question here about Microsoft 365 in the legacy portal. So we have some users still on the first rendition of the Microsoft 365 backup portal, and they're asking when will this be in the new UI? We're actually in the midst of a product moving people over to this new portal as we speak. And I see some more questions here, but it looks like we're running out of time. We'll try to get back to any of these questions that come through the chat. I want to thank you guys for spending some time here with us today. Bye.